Hello everybody, my name is Jennifer Stirrup and today I'm pleased to present Stephanie Locke. So we have a very British, rather Celtic feel to today's virtual chapter session. I'm from Scotland and Stephanie's from Wales, so it's all the Celts on board today. So welcome to this session of our virtual chapters and thank you to everyone attending. We are recording today. So I've just got a few comments to make just before we get started. We have obviously passed Summit 2014 and if you are looking for a discount, we have a code. So please do get in touch with us and I will see what we can do. So we have the amount there. Until September 26th is $1,895. So I just wanted to bring to your attention that we have a number of virtual chapters available. Last year we offered 21,000 plus training hours to the community worldwide, and I'm so proud of all the volunteers who worked really hard to make that happen. For this particular audience, I would like to draw your attention to big data, business analytics, business intelligence, data architecture and the Excel BI. And I'm also proud to announce we have a number of virtual chapters in different languages. So we have Chinese, French, Hebrew, Italian, Portuguese, Russian and Spanish. And last week we actually had, on the SQL Pass website, we had a number of virtual chapters posted and they were all in non-English languages. So we had Russian, French and Spanish. So I'm personally, as part of the board, really proud of the way we've grown globally as an organisation. So with that, I know it says June, that's my fault for not copying and pasting properly, but we have a number of virtual chapter sessions I'd like to draw your attention to. One is obviously Russian. If you do speak Russian, I'm not even going to attempt to read that out, but I can see the first word is SSIS, so that is good enough for me. Now Global French, Power BI, Hybrid avec la passerelle de gestion de données, presented by Jean-Pierre Rel. Now I'm so happy to see that because that is our first session in French, and the idea is we're not just touching the French community in Europe, but we are also touching the French-speaking part of Africa as well. So I'm really delighted that we are reaching out to that community in Africa too. So we have a number of business intelligence sessions. First one is September the 2nd. Counting is easy, measuring is hard. I'll be talking about using data visualization in terms of performance management. And the second business intelligence one is Power BI for managing personal fitness. You might call it powerlifting BI. Now the gentleman who's attending that session is called Matthew Roche. Matthew is a well-known tech ed presenter and he's also presented at SQL Pass Summit many times. I'm really looking forward to his session and I hope that you'll be able to join us for that. That's on September the 25th. So next in September we're trying to have a Power BI theme across some of the virtual chapters, so keep your eyes on your email for that. So a few up-and-coming SQL Saturdays, excuse my throat, I've had a bad cold. So September the 13th is Paris, very excited about that, and August the 30th is Oslo, which is our first SQL Saturday. In Norway, so that should be good. In September we also have Dublin, which is the third SQL Saturday over there. So good luck to the team. So if you want to volunteer with PASS, we've actually updated my PASS profile if you're interested in anything such as speaking or perhaps helping us with some translation work. For example, if you are interested or you know different languages, then please do get in touch. And here's the last slide before I hand over to Stephanie, which is volunteering with PASS. Every month we have the Most Outstanding Volunteer Award. It's actually quite difficult to pick because there's so many, but we do rely on your nominations to make that happen. And we also have the Passion Award winner, which is the highest accolade we give to the Most Outstanding Volunteer of the Year. I was very happy to win it in 2012, and If you can think of anyone you would like to nominate for that award, please do. I've already thought of some people I'd like to nominate, so please participate and we'll make that happen. So stay involved with us. There's our details there. Now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pass over to Stephanie. I'll let Stephanie introduce herself. And I'm going to make her presenter, and Stephanie's session is on R, so we'll look forward to this. And over to Stephanie.
Bear with me, folks. I just want to make sure that I have the right screen up.
You're not using Chrome, are you?
I am using Chrome.
I'm just teasing you. It's all right. I'll pass over to you anyway. Good luck, and I'll enjoy the rest of your session. Good luck.
Which screen can you see? Can you see the one with our pubs on?
Yes.
Or the... Okay. Awesome. Thank you. Okay, folks, hopefully you're fully aware that you are here for my introduction to our session. Now, normally we are, I like to get some R puns in, and I like to get everybody involved, but without the feedback, I don't know if you're doing it, but please feel free, if you're at your desk, to go R and get some colleagues involved. It does make the pression seem a lot more fun. So, as I said, it's an intro to R, and I'm Stephanie Locke, or Steph because I'm lazy. As Jen said, I'm from Wales in the UK, and I do BI and credit risk. So that means, as well as doing the whole data warehouse and reporting, that I also get involved with helping make commercial decisions about the strategy the company is undergoing. I get involved in the community, so I run the local Cardiff User Group. I chair SQLRelay this year, so I'm helping us organise 8 conferences around the UK. So that's me. Now on to R. So R is a kind of old language in some respects, but it's quite new in the in how many people are using it. It's a massive growth language at the moment, and it's designed initially all around analyzing data and visualizing it. Since then, it's grown, and you can do database extractions and writes, you can make web services, you can do interactive charts, real-time dashboards, and a whole range of other things. Pretty much you name it, you can do it. So it's a great language because it cuts down on how much work you have to do for analytics. I was very much a firm Excel fan for a long time. Loved how much power I had in Excel to do cool things, but it was difficult to transfer the knowledge sometimes, whereas my code, it's a lot easier once you understand the principles of it, of how programming works. You can more easily translate and just Google the issues. Time reduction. This is where the biggest thing for me from Excel. The amount of clicking I used to have to do to make charts and to format them correctly was a real waste of my time. In R, I can, and I'll show you this later, in just a line or two, I can make a good-looking chart, and most importantly, I can make that a template and then use it for other charts, which saves so much hassle. And standards. Coming from an Excel and a SQL Server background, I hadn't done a huge amount of testing in the past, particularly unit testing, and I was always quite concerned that I'd like to be right first time, and I don't think you can do that without testing. So the great thing about R is it has the ability to do testing with a nice package called Test That. And it's really easy to implement, and you can do source control, and you can do automated builds that only build if your code compiles correctly. And it's taken a lot of the anxiety out of my analytics. And for me, this is another big thing. It's free. You don't have to spend $5,000 a computer to get something like SAS. You can do all your analytics for free. Now, of course, you can leverage your analysis services to do a whole bunch of stats, and of course you have the great Power BI features, which if you're already paying for, then it's basically already free to use better. But R gives some additional flexibility because it's an environment as well as a language. Part of the tick box exercise that I feel any software needs to go through before I'll bother using it is it's got to work with SQL Server. In my world, it tends to have to work with MariaDB as well, but SQL Server's a biggie for me. And I'll go on to show you how to actually do the connections because it's actually really easy. And the last point is just your analysis and output documentation and report packs, they'll just look spectacular. It is so much easier to produce good-looking stuff in R that people start really getting a lot more faith in your analysis and a lot more impressed. They're a lot more likely to share it and dig into it. So I think that's a really good thing. Now, R. It used to be called S. You can still get S or S+, but that was written in the 70s in IBM. And then it was initially free, and then a commercial version was released. So and then somebody two people whose names began with R rebuilt S in an open source model. So the language has actually been around for a very long time, which means in some respects it doesn't have any of the sort of modern paradigms that you might expect. However, because it's an environment as well as a language, it's been extended, so you can work in a completely object-oriented way. If you're used to piped processes, you can do that. If you're used to working with SQL, there's ways that, and I'll go on to show you this, that you can do data manipulation with a very sort of comfortable look and feel. Pretty much if there's a way you're used to working in your code base, then you can probably get to that in R as well to make the transition easier. The documentation is tough in many places for base R though, because it was written mainly by academics for academics initially, but there are thankfully a whole lot of great resources now, particularly r-bloggers.com. That's a consolidated blog roll of 400 bloggers from around the world, all doing awesome things with R, and most importantly doing it in a way that's generally easy to understand. Oh yeah, there's this concept of a Google bubble. So Google don't like giving you results that aren't relevant to you. So when you first pick up a new language and you're trying to Google for it, your search results are going to be a bit hit and miss. So when you're using R, make sure you do R at the very beginning and maybe even include stats to just make sure that it's easier to search for. But it's also on Stack Overflow, so you can just do a keyword tag on Stack Overflow and search that way as well. R is very easy to install. R itself doesn't require a sysadmin. There is no, it never hits the user access control because it basically runs out of a folder and is compiled just in time. So there's no exe that runs with R. RStudio is probably the best IDE I've ever used for a scripting language. Toad comes quite close for SQL, but RStudio is absolutely cracking. That does require UAC. There are some things you need to take into account. RStudio will update on a regular basis, so you need to get somebody to come type in a password for you or manage that if you don't have control yourself. You have to be allowed to download zip files, which I know some people can be iffy about. And I've gotten used to running R in a team environment utilizing Linux servers. They're really cheap to spin up on the cloud, on Azure, easy to maintain, quite easy to maintain, and thankfully I've found a pretty easy process for making Linux boxes integrate into your Active Directory domain so that everything you do still works on single sign-on and is maintained via the same permissions and access methodologies that your sysadmins are used to. As well as those, LaTeX, and I'll talk a bit more about this later, is a great word processing typesetting product that's open source, been around for decades, absolutely awesome, and Git for source control. I imagine most of you are used to using some form of source control, and I think it's excellent to do this for your analysis because requirements change over time, but quite often you'll need to fall back to an earlier version and things. So, and 6 months down the line, you'll wonder why you made a change, and having some notes as to what you did can really help there. So, SQL Server. First of all, you need an ODBC driver for SQL Server. Then you install a package called RODBC, and that's what the first grey backgrounded line shows you. That's how you do an installation, and I've shown you a link to a UK repository. There's a whole bunch of them around the world, and if you don't put that repos line, then it will give you a big list of choices you can pick from. Then it has the console output, so you can see how it goes through the installation on a Windows machine, and then at the very bottom I show you what you need to do to activate the package. So if you've worked in a Linux environment before or are used to working with .NET with the NuGet paradigm. Basically, packages are discrete, almost mini programs that you can download and will work in your R environment to add additional functionality. In this case, it adds ODBC functionality. So once you've activated it, this is how you build a connection. If you've ever built an ODBC or OLEDB or even .NET connection in programming languages or seen it written out in Excel, then this will look very familiar to you. So this is saying use this driver, connect to this server, this database, and I've given it some username and password details. This is actually hitting a Azure AdventureWorks instance that Redgate have made available. So if you want to learn SQL, or you want to practice your reporting, or even build some demos like this, then you can utilize that, so you don't have to worry about installing and maintaining an AdventureWorks instance, which is awesome of them, I think. So you build your connection string, and you basically have this statement which says connect to this ODBC. And then you can use it in a SQL query statement to do SQL queries. And you'll notice I've got an arrow, and that's basically an assignment operator. So on the left-hand side, I've got the name of my object, and then on the right-hand side, I've got what's going into it. And then those all sit in my environment, and I'm able to call them at different times. And that's what I'm going to do for the person one, just to show that it actually does pull in top 5 data. And I can do that just by typing in person. And as you can see, it has the information. And I'll come back to this later on when I'm showing you how to do interactive documentation, but you'll notice at the top that I say 5 records returned. That is actually dynamic, so if I changed my top 5 statement to a top 10, then it would look at how many records are in person and update my slide deck. Some caveats or information you might need. You can use nice DSN files. I've just done the full ODBC connection to show you how easy it is to build on the fly. You can do your AD integration. You can tidy up away all the complexity so that you don't have to write it all the time by using a function. And you do want to ideally keep statements discrete, so only do one SQL statement, just because it saves you some issues with setting flags and things. Now my recommendation usually is to use your store procs or views where possible, just because if you want to do something, that's a great way of creating a data contract in your programming so that you can't accidentally leave things open to SQL injection attacks or changing requirements and things. It helps ensure that things work as expected at every level. So, basic analysis. Other people might start you on how to do some funky stats. Stats you can learn yourself at another time. For me, when it comes to YR, it's data manipulation and visualization. SQL is a great language and I still use it every day, but it has some inherent limitations in that things like cumulative sums are difficult, pivoting data. You know, there's things that are tough in SQL, and R can do those things much more quickly and effectively. And then there's the visualization. I don't want to dump something into Excel and then spend lots of time producing charts. I can also produce more complex charts without pre-aggregating data in R, which helps. So data table is another package like RODBC that extends the functionality of R and gives you a more optimized data wrangling tool. It does pretty much everything SQL can do, in the sense that it has group bys, selects, you can do subqueries, you can do aliases, that kind of thing. So it does give you that comfort zone of, you understand what SQL's like, you should be able to understand, once you've gone up to date on what the syntax is, you should be able to understand data table. And ggplot2, although most people just call it ggplot, is for producing the charts. Absolutely awesome, and I'll come on to show it to you. So for data table, I'm going to grab some SQL data. I've done some pre-aggregation just because I don't care about each individual order. So I've just done the value and the count on those. And then I'm putting it into a data table, and I'm doing a simple group by. You could very easily have done this in SQL, but I just wanted to show you how it works in R. So sales is our data. We're not doing any, that first bit is a square bracket to say, here's what we want to do to the sales table. The first argument is empty, so it goes straight from square bracket to comma, and in there would be where you stick any joins or where clauses. The .n is the list of additional columns I want returned, and you can add in there, that's basically your select area. And then your by statement is your final one, and that allows you to group by one or many values. Okay, just for clarity, I don't particularly like in the presentation slide deck the plain text view of the tables, so I'm using a function called cable, which wraps around it and just outputs a nicer look to the tables. And in this, I'm trying to show a task that would be quite complex with SQL, which is, I want to know the highest, the day we did the most traffic, the most orders for every region. That can be quite complex. You can do row numbers, the partition over by, which is a reasonable way to go, but again, you've got to do the pre-aggregation and things, and it can get complicated to maintain. This does it in one line. And again, we're doing the sales table. We're not doing any restrictions, and I'm returning the .sd is the subset, so like sub data table, and I'm picking from that subset, because it's like databases, the result of a query is a table. So in this, the result of a data table query is a data table, and we're picking the row which has the largest value, and we're doing that at a region level. So you can imagine it making lots of temporary tables for each of the regions and picking and returning the maximum row for each one, and then unioning that data set to bring it back. And that's what it looks like. And it's doing it all in one very simple line. Here's how you do some more complex group bys. So it also shows you how to do the order. So again, we're doing the sales table, and between the square bracket and the first comma is an order statement. That's how you do your order by. That just means that when it does the aggregations, all the years show in a nice, easy, in chronological order, as opposed to showing up in the first instance that the group shows up. Then after the first comma, I have a list of the things I want to return. So I'm doing an aggregation on value, and so that it doesn't just come out with an ugly title of some value, I've aliased it. And the same with volume. And then in my group by, which is after the second comma, I'm doing a custom column that I'm grouping by. And for that, I'm extracting the year and giving it, again, a pretty title. So it's very easy to do orders, aliases, and custom functions in your group by. And it doesn't take a lot of lines, which I like. So joins. This is a bit of a contrived example because I just wanted to show you how it works, and it's easier to show you on not a lot of data. So my first table is created, sales by year, and that is doing the annual sums and volumes by year. And you'll notice a slight modification I've done to the group by, and what I've said is make the column I'm grouping by the primary key for the table. In the second one, I'm grouping by region and by year, but I'm not doing a key by, mainly so I can show you how to do it next. So there's a nice simple set key statement, so you can apply this at any point. You can even change the keys. So I call it the primary key, but you can have duplicates and blanks in it. Generally, though, good database practice means you wouldn't have unnecessary duplicates. What I'm doing next is my join. So after the first bracket, I've got my sales by region table, which is joining on to the sales by year. And inside the second set of square brackets, I'm actually restricting it just to the UK sales, so that I now have a one-to-one relationship between my sales by year and my sales by region, because I'm only returning one region's worth of years. And then what I'm doing is my select statement, which is showing the proportion, and that's using columns from both tables and just wrapping it in a % so it gives a nicely formatted view as opposed to 0.0696. And because it was done on a join, the column that was used in the join shows up first. So you don't even have to write as much stuff to get the same info out. So that gives you a very quick overview of the techniques you can use in R for data manipulation that are very similar to SQL, There's also updates, inserts, and deletes that I could show you, but select is always a good way to go first. And now I'm going to show you how to make some pretty charts. So, like we did with the RODBC package and the data table package, first step is to call the ggplot2 package to basically add the functionality to your environment. And then I'm doing a quick plot. So with ggplot, they basically allow you to have a fine level of control over the chart, or if you just want something quickly, you can use the qplot, which requires less information, but I've filled it out a bit to show you how to do it. So the first thing in a quick plot is the x-axis. So I'm doing it by the year of the order. The next argument in a qplot is the y-axis, and we're putting the total value. And then the next is the fill. So the fill is equivalent to the series option in SSRS, or if you think about it as a pivot table or a table in Excel, depending on whether you've switched rows, this will be your rows or your columns, and that basically provides the fill. Instead of then I'm specifying where the data comes from, and in this case I'm saying I want the sales data, and I'm ordering by region so that instead of filling the region where it finds it in the natural data, I'm ordering it so that they stack in a sensible order. Then instead of allowing qplot to look at the data and pick the best chart for it, I'm being pernickety and deciding I want a bar chart, and I want the y-axis to show the value, the actual value, as opposed to doing a count or percentage of it. So personally, I wouldn't use this chart because I'm not a huge fan of the light grey backgrounds. The titles aren't correct. The titles aren't very nice. The y-axis is hard to read, and the colours are okay, but that's a lot of pink, which is not my preference. So what I'm going to do now is actually start refining this chart using the ggplot function, so I have finer control over it. And this is the first step. So like the previous chart, I'm specifying my data and ordering by region. Then I've got this AES argument, and that stands for aesthetics. And this is where the grammar of graphics comes in. So there's a separation between the data, the components of the chart that you'd like to show, which are your aesthetics, the geometries which you're using to display those aesthetics, and then theming, which is just the look and feel, the colors, the positions of text labels and stuff. So in my aesthetics, I want to show an x-axis, a y-axis, and I want to fill. Now you could do colors, you can do groups, there's a whole range of things you can do in there as aesthetics. If you want to do box plots and error bars and things, there's y-mins and maxes and all sorts. But I'm just dealing with a nice, easy XY chart. And then in the previous slide, I showed you geom equals bar. In this one, I'm using geom_bar, and I'm doing the stat equals identity. Now you can see that I've split this out with comments starting with hashes, but each line is ending with a plus. Basically, I'm constructing a chart line by line, and then it'll all execute as one thing. And what I'm then going on to do after I've added my geometry to my aesthetics and data is I'm adding my themes. So I'm adding a custom theme from ColorBrewer. If you haven't used colorbrewer.org with an American spelling, I highly recommend it. It allows you to get sets of colors that work very well together. For the number of levels you have in your charts, you can make sure they're print friendly, colorblind friendly. They have it for different types of charts, and it's a great way of getting good looking charts quite quickly. And so I'm saying I want to show a qualitative color scale for these series. They have continuous, which means the numbers go from top to bottom or bottom to top and have a scale of increasing color. They have divergent, which means it goes from good to bad. And then they have qualitative, which means these are categories and I just want them all separately colored. And then after that, I'm using a theme called theme minimal, which basically removes a load of the colors and shadings and makes the background less of an impact, but retains some grid lines to make it easier for people to gauge relative levels. This still isn't perfect though. The values are wrong. Well, the values are long and hard to read. The labels are all iffy, and this stacked bar chart makes it quite difficult to compare values year on year for the different regions. So I'm going to make a trellis chart, and this is done with a single additional line, and that is the facet_grid. And I'm saying split everything out by region. And I always find it really awesome how easy it is to do that. Just one line, and I have instantly properly scaled trellis charts. Doesn't look hugely pretty, but it's getting there. And in my last line, I've said I don't want a legend, and I want to angle the axis text in the x-axis at a horizontal angle so that they show up easier. So now I'm going to make it look better. Yeah. And on this I'm using theme minimal again, but I'm setting the relative text size of all the elements to a smaller value than I did previously, so that all the labels for the trellis fit nicely. I'm reducing the value to be expressed in millions, and I'm doing first of all a transformation at the aesthetic level, and then in scale Y continuous I'm saying label it up with $1. And I'm also doing some labeling with the labs column, and that's X, Y, title, that kind of thing. So now my chart looks much better in that you can compare year on year the respective values for each of the regions, so you can extract some more meaningful patterns out of it. And this is just cool. So I've gone from trellised to stacked bar charts so that you can see kind of mainly for the USA how things have changed over time for them. And this contains all the same stuff really that the previous charts have done, only in the geom bar I just added position equals fill. That's all you need to make a stacked bar chart. So you can be making things and then change your mind and just go position equals fill, and it's done. And I've changed the label away from dollar to % to match. And that's how easy ggplot is, that in 6 lines I can have a fully adjusted chart that does all the information. I didn't have to do any pivot tables, I didn't have to do pre-aggregation, it's just all there easily. And I could add that into a function, make that a function, and then I can call it again, and I can just say I want to do a different column in the x-axis. I would just do chart plus AX, x equals region code, for instance, and it would produce me the same chart but with a different x-axis. So it's really easy to, once you have a chart the way you think it should be, to produce it again and again. So all your charts have that consistency with none of the clicking required. So now I'd like to show you kind of after I got used to the basic data manipulation and charts, the things that have since then kind of taken over my workflow that used to happen in Excel. And one of the main things of that is documentation and reports, because I constantly have to produce slide decks for people with pretty charts, and we've got to make proposals, and that's got to have analysis, or we've got to produce statistical models, so that has to have a full raft. And if you're working in Excel to do your analysis, or in SQL Server, then at some point you have to copy and paste a chart into Word or PowerPoint. And then, if you want to keep the size down of the document, you have to paste it as a picture. And if somebody else has done this and it looks like a terrible chart, it looks like a god-awful chart, and you want to go in and fix it, it's a picture. And if they've not been very good, you don't know where it's from, and they might have changed the Excel document since then, so the chart isn't actually there anymore, so you've got to go through and recreate it from scratch. It's a real nightmare, particularly if you end up, as I've had in the past, with a 50-page stats model document from a consultant who was no longer there, and the work was inadequate and there wasn't enough of it. I had to completely rebuild from scratch because the analysis in Excel wasn't robust enough, wasn't present enough, and none of the charts had sources. So this is my pain, and why I was really impressed when I was able to do things like this presentation in R. And I do it using knitter. So it knits R code and your text to produce a document, is the feeling. It uses LaTeX, which, as I said earlier, is a typesetting or word processing tool, and is excellent. If you've ever been frustrated by copying a bullet point list from Outlook into Word and having to format it and spend ages doing it, LaTeX and Markdown is the tool for you. Move to these for your documents. It'll save you a world of pain. And since then, Shiny has in particular come out as one of the forerunners for reports that have parameters that people can edit. You can have real-time dashboarding and downloads, and basically it produces a report server that uses only R code to produce stuff, so no IIS or web server management, not as many deployment issues, and it's all in R, so you can unit test it, put in functions, that kind of thing. And I want to show you this Shiny stuff because, well, it's shiny. So how it works is you have two primary files. You have a server and a UI file. So one is effectively your client-side code, which determines what gets displayed on screen, and then you have your server-side code, which determines what you're going to do. And I will show you some examples shortly. Now, Shiny is great locally, but you can also make it, as I said, a report server. And for this, you currently need a Linux box. And you can make it password authenticating and stuff, but you'll probably need to do a little bit of work just to make sure it's robust. So on that note, I'm going to show you some examples. Oh, and all the code is on GitHub, so if you want to work through this presentation, because it was all made in R, you can actually go through and do it yourself. So I'm going to create a new R script and paste in what I was doing. So I'm going to load my library Shiny. I'm saying load up the examples, and I'm going to run one. And this shows you that we can do text boxes that change. You can choose different data sets, and you can change things. So this is all very, very interactive, and if you scroll down, there's actually less than 10 lines of code here, and almost all of it's commentary. So you can see how it's set up. And here's the UI. So it's really easy to produce something. Now, I'm running out of time. So now that I've shown you Shiny, which is really easy for you to play with, I'm going to skip the section on dynamic documents. I think I've already hopefully kind of whet your appetite in this respect, and I really recommend you check out R and Markdown. So here are the lifesaver links. It took me months to find these, and if I'd have had them to begin with, my life would have been so much easier. So you want Markdown, you want Shiny, you really want LaTeX, and you really want some learning R, which is try R, some information, and the adv.r is by Hadley Wickham, the god of R, and shows you how to write and gives you the information needed for you to run and write good quality R code. So I'd like to cover off some questions, Jen, if we can. What do I need to do for that, Jen?
Hello there. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah.
All right, good. Just checking. All right. We've just got a few questions from, first of all, some from Nat, who's asking how easy or difficult to learn R is it and to become fluent in a short duration?
It depends, as usual, but it really does depend on what your focus is. So if you wanted to be good at everything in R, so the stats, the data management, web services, database rights, that's going to take you a good while, a reasonable while, in the same way it would to become proficient in a lot of those things individually. But if you want to get up and running with some basic data management and charting and some quick interactive reports, I think you can be up and running reasonably in a few days.
All right, thank you very much. The second question, can we do enterprise BI delivery for 50 to 100 users using R?
So I suppose that contains a few main components in that. You've got your report, your sort of web-based reporting delivery, your scheduled reports. You might have a few data models there, and you've got a bunch of self-service queries and knowledge workers. So Shiny, you can get an enterprise level server. Can't necessarily do it for free. For your scheduled reporting, it's easy to schedule documents and emails to come out. You'd probably need to build your own little interface to enable people to do subscriptions easily on a to save you having to manage it. For ad hoc stuff, R is great for your finance bots. They will lap R up. You might have more of a learning curve issue if you try to implement it in other areas of your business. But all the information is exposable, so you can output to Excel, Word, CSV, and all the other things, so that people can still do their usual thing with Excel.
All right, I don't know if it helps, but I can add a bit to that.
Yeah.
When we did the past Business Analytics Conference, we had a session there which talks about Enterprise R. The gentleman there was from an organisation called Revolution Analytics. They are not sponsoring this session and not endorsing them because it's a paid solution. But if you are interested in Enterprise R, that's just one option that you could look at. As an aside, Revolution Analytics actually create R Hadoop. So they are interested in things like scalability, large data models for big data sets, creating ensemble models for fidelity of the data and improved lift of prediction models simply by using large scalable data sets. So their move towards Enterprise R is an interesting one, and it's at the point at which open source starts to end and organisations start to come in. But that's fair enough. I tend to think you get what you pay for, but I hope that answers your question, Nat. But if you're interested, I can see if I can send you the link to the gentleman's session, and I have forgotten his name, which is my fault, not his. It was a good session, and I can tweet that up later.
If you're in London, Nat, if you're the Nat I think you are, there is an Effective Applications of the R Language conference next month, which includes Revolution Analytics, R Studio and stuff. So there's a whole lot of people putting R in enterprises, delivering talks on an actuarial level and all sorts of things which you might be interested in as well.
Alrighty. There's a few other things. So a gentleman, Mike Honey, has, I think, Mike's asked a few questions about your codes. for example, is a bit confused, I think, about the join.
Okay.
So I wondered if you can maybe look at that again.
So this is quite compact, and I probably need to do some more work to make a more elegant view as to what a join looks like. So in this, I set up two tables, one sales by year, one sales by region. So the sales by year table has 3 columns: year, annual value, and annual volume. And I set in the statement that the key for this table is the year. I then went on to do a sales by region, and that had 4 columns: region, year, value, and volume. Then, instead of, I could have set the key in the key by statement in sales by region, but instead I pulled out the assignment into an individual statement. So that's using the set key command, and you can add any number of columns into your key that way. Then to do my join, so it's basically the syntax is I square brackets, and inside the square brackets is J. So you have one data table outside the square brackets and the other one inside, and that's how you do a join. So in this case, I've got sales by year on the outside, and then a subset of sales by region on the inside of the square brackets. And then I go on to do my select statement, which is my proportion. Hopefully that helps.
All right. Hope that helps, Mike. You have our email address. If you have any other questions, you can send them through. So there's another question, which I think might be aimed at me, but I'm not sure. How do I expose the data set produced by R to use as source in something else, e.g. Tableau? Do you want me to pick that up?
Sure. I mean, for me, I just dump everything out to CSVs or the database. But you might have, I don't really work with Tableau, so you might have some neater tips and tricks.
Yeah, Tableau has got a connector to R. So you need to set up rserve, and it sets up a small proxy on your laptop, on your desktop, that basically pumps the data back and forth. And the idea there is you can visualize straight from R, and what you would do is use calculated fields in Tableau that would contain your R statements. But that's probably a topic for another day, but if anybody's got any Tableau questions, I can pick those up another time. So let me see. All right, so there's a comment here from Ben. Hello, Ben. There's some excellent courses on Coursera on R, so thank you, Ben, for that. Yes, if you're interested, there's good courses on Coursera. There's also some good ones. Stanford do a good machine learning course as well. So I'm going through that at the minute because I enjoy it. And there's lots of great resources. A great place to start looking is rseek.org. I'll say that again with my accent. It's rseek, all one word, .org. And basically that's a subset of Google, which is dedicated towards R resources, because as you can imagine, trying to look up the word or the letter R in its own is going to, you'll be pretty quickly banging your head off a wall. So if you look up rseek.org, that should help you find some other stuff. But yeah, thank you for the pointer. And I think that is our final question. I'm just double checking. Alrighty, yep, that's it. So we have, I'm just going to take control back so that it's back to me. That's it. And what I'd like to do is show you this. You don't need to see that. Alright, okay, so hopefully you can all see that, but what we do is we have the past data warehousing, your business intelligence virtual chapter. So thank you very much for your session, Stephanie. What I will do is...
Thank you for having me.
No, thank you. So what I'll do is I'll post this up. It'll probably be a bit later this evening. I've got I need to go back to work, so I'll do it later this evening. But I wanted to say thank you all very much for your attendance. Thank you to Stephanie for a great session. And wherever you are in the world, because we have a lot of international people on today, good morning, good evening and good night. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you,
Thanks.
folks.
Bye.